Elegantiæ Latinæ, or Rules and Exercises Illustrative of Elegant Latin Style, by Edward Valpy. Read for the LibriVox Language Learning Collection, Volume 4. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Cynthia Moyer. Elegantiæ Latinæ, excerpt, Chapter 1, pages 1 through 12. Elegantiæ Latinæ, Chapter 1, of the choice and elegance of particular words. Quinam igitur dicendi est modus melior, quam ut Latine, ut plane, ut ornate, ut ad id quodcunque agetur, apte congruenterque dicamus. Cicero. Elegance, according to its derivation from eligere, consists in the choice of the most appropriate words and expressions, and in their composition and clear and perspicuous order. It depends chiefly on the usage of the best Latin writers. When, therefore, the scholar has selected those words which are appropriate in their meaning to the sense of the subject, the next thing will be to consider whether they have been used by the best writers of antiquity. But let it be premised that no word can be elegant or beautiful in itself, in its disjointed state, but merely as far as it strengthens, connects, or illustrates the subject, or at least as far as the Latin word conveys in its true meaning the full force of the English expression. It would be absurd, therefore, to use at random the first word which presents itself, without considering whether it is appropriate to the sense; as in saying that the good man is cheerful and resigned at the hour of death. Though traditus signifies resigned, that is, delivered up, it does by no means express the English meaning, and therefore it would be necessary to search till a proper word offers itself for resigned, in the sense it bears in this sentence, which is tranquil or contented. In investigating, then, the true and proper signification of words, it will be necessary to understand each different sense in which they are used. And if the scholar acquaints himself as much as he can with their etymology and original meaning, he will be enabled to write purer Latin, and to avoid many Greekisms, obsolete and barbarous words, and those which have too great an affinity to the English, introduced into use by several modern and inelegant writers, as impossibilis, impossibile, etc. Should the Latin, however, not furnish a word sufficiently elegant or fully expressive of the English idea, or if the force or dignity of the subject requires it, it may be necessary to vary an expression by means of a short periphrasis, or of a phrase instead of a simple word. But in the choice of phrases care must be taken that they do not convey more meaning than we wish to express. Thus in saying that mothers embrace their infants, though ruere in amplexum is sometimes a very good phrase for amplecti, yet who would say matres solent in amplexum infantium ruere, when the simple word expresses the idea so much better? And though inflammatum essa ira is often used for irasci, yet it implies much more. And it would be absurd to say scripsit ei pater Paulum ira inflammatus, for Paulo iratior, rather angry. Again, though utor is sometimes elegantly used for the verb habeo, yet in its meaning it must include the use as well as the possession of any thing. We should not say, therefore, avarus utitur magnis opibus, if we wished merely to say avarus habet magnas opes. In short, the sense or the context must be considered very minutely and accurately before the scholar is enabled to judge of the propriety or the elegance of the corresponding expressions. These few preliminary observations will be sufficient to show the necessity of selecting such Latin words and expressions as convey in their full force and meaning the true sense of the English. Nothing indeed is more conducive to the purity and elegance of the Latin language than a happy contexture of elegant Roman phrases or forms of speaking, used by the best and purest writers. With these, therefore, the learner should be directed to store his memory, and be taught how to use them in his own composition. For effecting this essential purpose, which certainly requires time, diligence, and observation, it is advisable that the scholar should write down daily whatever Latin phrase and elegant form of speaking he may occasionally meet with in his lessons, and give a weekly account of them to the master. That excellent little book, Valpy's Dialogues, should also be put early into his hands. These should be thoroughly learnt and well imprinted on the memory, as the phrases and forms of speech are collected from the purest writers. It will also be necessary to observe that there are many peculiar modes of expression or idioms in the English, which can only be rendered by adopting some Latin phrase or using such a variation as will best suit the Latin style. These will be gradually exemplified as the scholar proceeds through these rules and exercises. For instance, send me word by letter. To use a literal or rather barbarous expression, we should say mitte mihi verbum. To speak true or elegant Latin, we should say fac me per litteras certiorem. I am short of money. Barbarously or literally, brevis sum pecuniae. Elegantly, deficit me pecunia. I should be loth to have thee beaten. I will make them friends. He made as though he wept. Such expressions on the very first view carry with them the appearance of English idioms. It would be therefore absurd carelessly to say essem invitus habere te percussum, etc. But with a little care and judgment, and by considering their real meaning, it will be easy to give them a turn which may answer that meaning, and to find out a corresponding Latin expression. Thus we shall say, I should be loth to have thee beaten, non lubens committerem ut vapulares, that is, I would not willingly give cause that. I will make them friends. Redigam eos ingratiam. He made as though he wept. Simulavit quasi fleret, or se flere. And so on of phrases in general. Thus again, I will make good, that is, supply, supplebo. He made much of me, i.e., he treated me well. Comiter me tractavit. He makes much of himself, i.e., he indulges himself. Sibi or genio indulget. You make game of me, i.e., you laugh at me. Ludis me, or ludibrio me habes. You can do much with him. Tu multum apud eum potes. You know what account I make of him, i.e., how much I esteem him. Scis quanti eum faciam. I will have nothing to do with your friendship, i.e., I renounce. Renuncio tuae amicitiae. I have my brother to entreat, i.e., my brother remains to be entreated. Restat mihi frater exorandus. Thou mayst, as far as I am concerned, licet tibi per me, thou mayst be gone for me, licet habeas per me. To be well spoken of, bene audire. What trade are you of, i.e., do you pursue? Quam artem factitas. To ask the advice of any one, i.e., to consult. Consulere. You are sure to be punished, i.e., a certain punishment awaits you. Certa poena te manet. Be ruled by me, i.e., listen to me. Ausculta mihi. I am not in fault, i.e., blamable, or I am free from fault. Vaco culpa. Let him lose, be made to go without, his supper. Multetur cena. To be sick of a disease, fever, want, i.e., to labor under. Laborare morbo, etc. Besides a great number of phrases which are derived from the particular forms and customs of the Romans, and which a more intimate acquaintance with Latin authors will soon render familiar to the scholar, as to sell by auction, hastae subjicere, with good or ill luck, bonis aut malis avibus, to marry, ducere uxorem, etc., and so on of phrases in general. This shows at the same time the absolute necessity of attending more to the sense than the words, and of suiting the expressions accordingly. Many English sentences may appear very difficult and intricate, and sometimes at first sight scarcely susceptible of being converted into elegant and at the same time appropriate Latin. These sentences the scholar should be directed to read repeatedly till he understands perfectly their sense and meaning. His first business will be then to simplify, so as to reduce them to their bare and original idea, divesting them of every superfluous word and idiomatic expression. And he should not begin to write any part of the sentence till he has furnished himself with the Latin corresponding to the chief heads of it. For his first attempt will not always embrace the full scope and purport of its meaning, and it may be necessary to vary his sentence and give it a new and different turn, by the change of active into passive, or passive into active, etc., and then it will be easy to give it a fuller dress, and so to connect it by the addition of any suitable and necessary words, as may give to the whole a force equal to that of the English. For instance, let us examine this sentence, as it is translated from Cicero, which at first sight certainly appears very difficult, and which, if it could be turned into literal Latin, would be insufferable to the ear. "But nothing," says he, "seems to me of superior excellence than for a speaker to have that irresistible hold on the assemblies of men, as by the charms of his eloquence to bend their minds to his own purposes, to lead them to whatever point he pleases, or dissuade them at pleasure from whatever object they may have in view." As soon as the scholar begins to dissect this sentence, and reduce some of the expressions to their simple idea, he will find that it will soon admit of a plain, easy, and at the same time an elegant dress. Thus, for the bare comparative, more excellent, praestabilius. Of superior excellence is a common English turn. For a speaker to have an irresistible hold is so perfectly English that a literal translation would not be Latin, and means nothing more than by speaking to hold, dicendo tenere. To bend their minds to his own purposes is simply mentes allicere, to his own purposes being a mere English redundancy, wholly unnecessary in Latin. To whatever point he pleases is evidently another turn peculiar to the English, which is fully comprehended in this plain expression, quo velit. Dissuade them at pleasure from whatever object they may have in view, is equally an English turn of expression, the meaning of which is fully included in these few words, unde velit deducere. The whole sentence being thus simplified, will now appear plain and easy, and will quickly assume an elegant and Ciceronian dress. Neque vero mihi quidquam inquit, praestabilius videtur, quam posse dicendo tenere hominum cetus, mentes allicere, impellere quo velit, unde autem velit, deducere. And as the young Latin writer is apt to follow too closely the literal order of the English, it may be necessary to guard him against this common error by the following observation, which, though coming more properly under the head of the order and arrangement of words, may be introduced in this place as being applicable to almost every example in this book. It is the genius of the Latin language that the order and position of words are not bound by so strict and immutable laws as in other languages, though certain rules must be followed, and such an arrangement preserved that the style may not be confused, puerile, and inelegant. Seldom, therefore, does the nominative case come first in the sentence, but other cases, unless the sense and perspicuity absolutely require it, are generally placed before it. Examples. 1. Gaius Julius then far surpassed all his predecessors and contemporaries in pleasantness and facetiousness. And though he was not an impetuous orator, yet no man's speeches were ever more seasoned with urbanity, wit, and sweetness. Begin by the ablatives, and then the nominative. 2. As I frequently revolve in my mind and retrace in my memory the annals of antiquity, those men appear to me very fortunate indeed, who, in a well-constituted republic, after having arrived at the summit of glory and honours, could hold such a course of life as to be able to pursue their employments without danger, or live in retirement with dignity. Here begin by the dative, and change the verbs revolve and retrace into participles to agree with the dative. But in order to see the necessity of this transposition, begin by the nominatives and preserve the grammatical order of the English in these two examples, and their inelegance, when compared with the other, will immediately appear. But though elegance of style depends very much on this transposition, care must be taken to avoid a confused intermixture of words, that, for instance, what belongs to a clause of a sentence in which the relative qui, quae, quod occurs, and is dependent upon it, may not be intermixed with the clause which contains the antecedent; as, the man who has once transgressed the bounds of modesty must be completely and perfectly impudent. It may not be inelegant to say, qui semel verecundiae finis transierit, eum prorsis oportet esse impudentem; but to say, qui semel verecundiae eum prorsis oportet esse impudentem, fines transierit, would render the sense obscure and indeed unintelligible. Besides this obscurity, whoever wishes to acquire an elegant style will be careful to avoid a too frequent repetition of the same word, if it does not tend to give greater weight or perspicuity to the subject. The same syllable, too closely and frequently repeated, cannot but be harsh to the ears, and therefore inelegant, as monet et hortatur. I would not say per breve tempus, but per tempus per breve. Though Cicero himself sometimes falls into this apparent negligence, as sed multo etiam magis monente et denuntiante te. Several words following each other with the same termination should be carefully avoided, as etiam aeternos multos claros viros nominarem. And what can be more offensive to the ear than these words, flentes, plorantes, lacrimantes, obtestantes? To this negligence must be referred a too great concourse or clashing of the same letter, which either must produce a disagreeable harshness in the sound, if a repetition of the same consonants, as rex, xerxes, or, if they are vowels, must cause such a hiatus as will produce some difficulty to pronounce, as magno operto ore. Where it is possible to give a strict attention to the smooth concourse of the words without endangering the force of the idea, when the preceding word terminates with a consonant, the next should begin with a vowel, and vice versa. There are a few words, however, the succession of which is not arbitrary, but which has been fixed by the unvaried usage of the ancients. Ac is not found before a vowel, but always before a consonant. We do not say ac ego, but atque ego; seldom neque autem, but neque vero. It will also be very necessary to guard against poetical endings of a prose sentence, which, though not very culpable or disagreeable in themselves, yet will not fail to displease, as they carry an appearance of affectation and studied conceit. This fault, indeed, was much sooner observed by the ancients, who are supposed in their common conversation to have pronounced the language more according to metre than it can be by us, who pronounce many syllables different from their quantity; as this hexameter of Tacitus: urbem Romam a principio reges habuere; or this line from the same author, which is a still more complete verse: auguriis patrum et prisca formidine sacram. Every kind of ambiguity should also be carefully avoided, as, for instance, in the case of adjectives, where multorum, if used instead of multarum rerum, might be mistaken for the masculine gender. A list of Latin prose authors, whose authority may be safely followed by the young scholar, and whose style may be imitated with advantage, as exhibiting the purest standard of Latin elegance, will now be given: Cicero, Caesar, Livy, Nepos, Sallust, Terence, flourished during the Golden Age, which is commonly computed from the time of the Second Punic War to the year 14 after Christ. These writers afford the best specimens of classic purity with respect to the selection of words. At the same time, it may be observed that words which occur only once or twice in Cicero, as munitare, invalitudo, may be considered of doubtful authority; and words which occur in Livy, Cornelius Nepos, or Sallust only, as famae, arum, equally doubtful. Quintilian, Tacitus, Curtius, Justin, Valerius Maximus, Pliny the Younger, flourished in the Silver Age, which is computed from the year 14 to about the year 140 after Christ. These authors may be safely followed as the most reputable of this age; and though the Latin language began to decline in their time, yet it exhibited in their writings no unfavourable model of the purity and elegance of the Augustan age. End of Elegantiæ Latinæ, excerpt by Edward Valpy.